Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for the opportunity to talk about some future or other applications we might think about. Up to now we have guidelines on the liver, on the breast, on the thyroid, on the prostate, and but there might be other applications we could think about. And there's one big question on the T2 and the T3 staging. That means if a lesion is growing and infiltrating below the intestinal wall. Here you can see nicely an image of a stomach cancer, and you can see movements right on here, and you can see infiltration and no movements over there. So real-time imaging observation might give you additional clue, not proof, that it was finally a T3 lesion, and we are observing, how to say, the borders a little better. To my experience, but there are no good studies, this is endoscopic ultrasound, that you have a B-mode image and you do not know if it's beyond the intestinal wall or within the intestinal wall. Elastography, strain imaging, here you can see a clear border, and this is pretty often to our experience, and I do believe it's a very good tool, but not examined so far, to determine T2 within the intestinal wall, T3 beyond the intestinal wall. One more example of a serous carcinoma of the stomach. You can see here quite nicely the image, eventually even better in this case. So this large stomach cancer was only within the intestinal wall. Contrast-enhanced ultrasound might add also some additional information. Subepithelial lesions within the intestinal wall might give us a little bit, how to say, better delineation. The stomach, and here you might see something out from the muscle proper layer. It might be. Elastography gives you a clear clue that this GIST, gastrointestinal stroma tumor, in the muscle proper layer is growing beyond this serosa, and that's a tumor with some risk factors which has to be operated in a combined endoscopic and laparoscopic way. Only one mentioning that GIST is an eye catcher. The gastrointestinal stroma tumor has an eye-catching feature. Here you can see a GIST, and the eye-catching feature is that you have spontaneous necrosis even before any kind of treatment. And those necrosis, spontaneous necrosis, starts at the very beginning with a size of about 2 centimeters. Other subepithelial lesions like lipoma, leiomyoma does not display such spontaneous necrosis at this early size. The characterization, I already showed images of a lipoma. You can see soft, in this case, soft green and red in the Hitachi platform, and you can see a heterogeneous or even homogeneous stiff pattern in this apricot-soft tumor, granular cell tumor of the esophagus. And you can see quite nicely that there have been some infiltrating features at the edge of this rare esophageal tumor. Lymph nodes. It is well known that somewhat diffuse infiltration of a malignant lymph node might be stiff, stiffer than the surrounding tissue. And the more interesting feature is, in this lymph node we have no architecture of the lymph node hilum, but you can see using elastography that the center part is soft, red. In the hilum it's a little bit stiffer, and the lymph node shows a typical architecture. So in this case I pretty much know that I shouldn't biopsy this lymph node, because in elastography it shows a normal architecture. For all what I'm showing you right now, there is no, how to say, published evidence. Those are observational ideas, and I will discuss it with you right now. This is the subcarinal region below the bronchi. You can see two lymph nodes, and it was this one who finally was the infiltration of bronchial carcinoma. And in the median line, if there is a tumor, it would cause that this patient had to have a neoadjuvant treatment, because that subcarinal lymph node at the contralateral side has to be treated by neoadjuvant treatment. I have shown you the normal lymph node architecture, and here I show it with B mode. The hilum is soft and fatty, and the surrounding is stiffer in a normal lymph node. This is a take-home message, that if you cannot delineate B mode architectural signs of the hilum, look for elastography to delineate the hilum. If you see the normal architecture, you might be quite sure that this is an inflammatory and not malignant infiltrated lymph node. One other take-home message: the early metastasis of a highly differentiated adenocarcinoma is not diffuse blue, it is circumscribed. Here you can see a 10 millimeter lymph node, and you can see that this edge, only this edge, has an early malignant infiltration. What we are doing is the ultrasound elastography guided puncture. I look for this area in this lymph node, and here you can see nicely the needle. So in a lymph node of about 10-12 millimeters, we can even guide our needle for better results. Again, a lymph node, this was in the colon. Colorectal carcinoma, a normal part of the lymph node, the malignant infiltration stiffer than the surrounding tissue. Endoscopic ultrasound using the Hitachi platform, blue is stiffer all over the world. So this is in accordance to the guidelines. Another example, here you can see where to put the needle in this lymph node. B mode might not really allow you to guide the needle direction. Two lymph nodes. You insert in this lymph node the needle because it's diffusely stiff. So I showed you a few examples. There are no good published studies where the future might go T2, T3 beyond intestinal wall, because T3 has neoadjuvant treatment, T2 will be operated without treatment, neoadjuvant treatment. And lymph nodes in highly differentiated adenocarcinoma of the intestinal tract, the early infiltration of a lymph node starts circumscribed, and you can detect it using elastography. Focal liver lesions might be displayed as stiffer, but as you can see here in that metastasis, a second metastasis, but with a different system. The highest values are in cholangiocellular carcinoma and metastasis. HCC might be even softer than liver cirrhosis, and therefore we will see an example that focal nodular hyperplasia, which is a circumscribed liver cirrhosis, has very high values. FNH is benign, metastases are malignant, and they show pretty much the same values. A focal fatty sparing, you can see the arterial blood supply, and you can see that using point shear wave elastography with VTQ, that the values are normal. Almost all focal liver lesions have higher values compared to the normal surrounding liver parenchyma. And here you can even not really see it quite well, but the focal nodular hyperplasia really displays values of 34 kilopascal, whereas the surrounding liver parenchyma has 8 kilopascal. FNH are of high value. Take-home message is shear wave elastography is useful to determine the surrounding liver parenchyma in patients with focal liver lesion, but the value of the respective focal liver lesion does not add really such a good value in daily practice. So, third take-home message. Staging in biliary tract. You might be interested if such a lesion is a stone or is a neoplasia. Contrast-enhanced ultrasound, endoscopic contrast-enhanced ultrasound, shows there is enhancement. Therefore, this is not a stone. Therefore, this is a neoplasia. But also, elastography can show the stiffer elements of a very tiny biliary neoplasia, which hasn't even been seen by MRI next to the papilla. This is endoscopic ultrasound with best resolution in that very small respective field. Or here you can see a malignant infiltration in a normal sized bile duct beyond the bile duct. And you can see elastography shows the proof of principle, proof of feasibility, that there is malignant infiltration beyond the wall. So it's not only good for detection, it's also good for the infiltration beyond the wall, as I've shown for the intestinal wall. If you go to India and some other places, I'm not sure about Vietnam, focal pancreatic lesion might be not only ductal adenocarcinoma, they can be autoimmune pancreatitis, but they can be also, as published in this paper, pancreatic tuberculosis. So, in autoimmune pancreatitis, a focal lesion is not only stiff, but the other parts of the pancreatic parenchyma are as stiff as well. Even BMO does not show changes. So, elastography adds additional information in patients with autoimmune pancreatitis and a little less obvious in pancreatic tuberculosis. Rectal sphincters. Here you can see the inner and the outer sphincter. But sometimes we are not sure about the fibrotic changes of the sphincter. So here you can see that the inner sphincter, the dark one, is often softer, and that the outer sphincter is often heterogeneous with intermediate stiffness. In inflammation, we know quite well there are a lot of vessels, and such hypervascularity is a typical sign of inflammation. But be sure, the inflammatory changes of the inner sphincter you cannot know in the B mode, but you can see clearly in the elastographic image. This is a soft endoscopic ultrasound. Red is soft. You have to be aware of that. Shear wave elastography, it's vice versa. So here we can see a clear delineation, and we can see that inflammatory reaction. So that's how to say I'm using elastography in any kind of examination to learn more, to get a better impression of all that features. Here you can find a small nodule which has a stiffer inner part. It was a thrombosis of a hemorrhoid nodule change. So proof of principle, a thrombus should be stiffer than the surrounding tissue, and this is also true in thrombosis of the hemorrhoids. We have been going through intestinal tract. Infiltration beyond the intestinal tract might be a good indication, which is also true for the bile duct using endoscopic ultrasound. We have been going through lymph nodes. If a lymph node is black and you do not see anymore the lymph node architecture by B mode, elastography might show in inflammatory lymph nodes the normal architecture. Early malignant infiltration is circumscribed in highly differentiated adenocarcinoma. We might detect, puncture, and start neoadjuvant treatment. It has a consequence. I have shown you some ideas about the pancreas, inflammation, and in autoimmune pancreatitis, it's not only the lesion, but the surrounding pancreatic parenchyma is stiff. It's a typical sign of autoimmune pancreatitis. And we have been going through the sphincter, where I have shown that we can see inflammatory reaction, we can see early fibrous tissue, which might be of importance in the diagnosis and treatment of incontinence. One more time, and the last one, I hope that has clarified a little bit about the future of elastography and complementary use of elastography in other organs. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for the presentation. As we know, I think we have received the information about all the application in the GI tract, lymph node, and other maybe sphincter muscle. I think it's very useful. And if you have a question, Guneda, yeah. And now the next topic is the live demos. I think before the live demo, you have some to the speaker. Các chỉ có vấn đề đặt trước khi chúng ta có một cái chương trình là trình bày các cái ca, thì hai giáo sư này thì đây là những vấn đề chúng ta cho là cũng tương đối chưa phải là nhiều ở Việt Nam về vấn đề sử dụng elasto, nhất là ultrasound. Thì các anh chị có đóng góp ý kiến hay là có ý kiến thảo luận với speaker không?
Bác thì chụp lại cái micro.
Thank you, Professor Dietrich, for a very comprehensive talk. And I just a small, just a question about your experience in the